You're listening to All Things 3D, where we talk about the world of fabricating, designing, and capturing in the third dimension.
Whoa. This looks really cool. What are we looking at here, Mike?
Well, we're looking at BladeRunner 9732, but I'm a little preoccupied right now. But essentially, this is an early, what do you want to call it, walkthrough of the, do you remember Decker's apartment in Blade Runner? The guy has meticulously gone through and recreated it in 3D, objects and everything, and this is just a video. So I found out from this video.
Is it a VR thing? Or just a general game?
We don't know yet. It's not a game right now. It's just a full video thing, and I'll talk about that a little bit more soon. But essentially, he did the whole thing in Unity, so he can do whatever he wants to it. So he hasn't really determined what he's going to do. Obviously, the property is copyrighted, so he's trying to work something out with them in order to make this possible. And the reason I brought this up is it looks like there's going to be some footage in VR, or maybe a couple of specials. Oh, I'm sorry, I got a little preoccupied there. We'll come back to this a little bit later, but hey, you know, Chris, this is GVRgraveyard.
Whoa! Yeah, you were showing us this last week.
Yeah, but you remember I couldn't actually show it, so...
Yeah, and we were on a different headset. Now it looks like you're using your uPLAy.
Well, I was using the uPLAy before, but I was using the headband. But now I've got it mounted on... Gee, this must be the Note 7 I've got here. But
I like this little uPLAy thing. You've got like a controller that you can actually like...
Right, and you can buy this on Amazon for like $30, maybe a little less than that.
Wow.
And put your phone on it, and then because the way the uPLAy is designed, where it just slaps on each side of the phone, you could use it like this. So the uPLAy is extremely versatile, and as you know, fits in your pocket. So on that note, let's get started. So let me show you some of the first items. Let me go to this. So again, let's jump back to 9732 BladeRunner. So one of the things that, if you can see behind me here, is the, here we go, is that he's used environmental, what do you want to call it, textures. So if you notice the walkthrough that we went through and what this looks like, by doing that, he creates a much more grittier, realistic view. And a lot of people, developers, including myself, have gone to this. I use a product called, gosh, I'll get back to in a moment. But the one that's used here is called Substance Painter. And there are a few now that can support this, and Unity as well as Unreal support these new environmental textures. And what it does is it gives you a great, gritty environment look to it. But in this case, let's go through some of these images here. This is a complete fabrication of the brand new, or not brand new, Decker's apartment in Blade Runner. You remember the movie Blade Runner, Chris?
Yeah.
So in the movie Blade Runner, you know, if you remember, there was some fog and ambience in it. So this guy is trying to recreate this. And as mentioned, he's doing this all in Unity. So I had a chance to chat with him yesterday, and I believe he's from the Netherlands. So that's one of the reasons that he couldn't be on. Busy, and plus the fact is he would be going out to dinner at this time. So he decided to decline. But he did give me this, as well as this, and both of these will be in the show notes, this interview of what he's trying to do. And here you can see he's actually added a few more atmospheric changes. But why did this come up? Well, I don't know if you're aware of it, but there's going to be a new Blade Runner coming out that will be starring Harrison Ford in 2017. And one of the things that was identifying is that they're going to be doing some VR specials, small segments beforehand. Ridley Scott is, I guess, really on board with it. But somebody put a link in here. But essentially, this is the entire environment, the empowerment, and as mentioned, he doesn't know what he's going to do with it because it's copyrighted. If he gets permission, he may make this into an interactive VR. So like if you touch something, things will happen. But isn't that cool?
That's way cool. I really,
so
it has that gritty look. And what did you say that it's called? Substance Painter is the texture
Substance
pack?
Painter, which is also one of the, it's up here, Substance Painter. And then the product that I use, which I'll come back to it. I can't even remember the name right now, and I don't want to get off subject. But there are a few programs that allow environmental textures to be used, and that's just one of them. They're the ones that kind of started the game, and they are supported both in Unreal and in Unity. But he also identifies why scale is important. He shows his assets. Now, if you notice, one of the big things that's being used a lot is what they call AUO, so ambient occlusion. Can't remember. But essentially, by providing that, it gives you built-in shadows. So it gives it a more three-dimensional feeling. And there are a lot of tools, including Substance Painter, that provide this feature or function to it. And it can be done either as a texture or directly to the vertices of your object. And I have been using that as well. It's pretty cool and really has very little effect or penalty in providing it, and actually adds a more three-dimensional aspect to your assets. But he went through and he gives credit. I guess he's got a couple of people working on it. It shows his workflow. He's a big fan of 3ds Max. I've used it in the past too. He also says he works with Blender, but his main tool is 3D Max and Substance Painter. He has a balcony scene, so he had to recreate the outer atmosphere of it as well, as you can see in this window here. And plus, he's also planning to create one of the actresses from the movie itself, if you remember the movie. So they're working on that.
I got to go back and rewatch this now.
Well, remember in 2000,
it wasn't BladeRunner was like 80s.
Yes, it was a long time ago, but many of the effects are still cool. It obviously has a strong following, including myself. In fact,
was that a Ridley Scott movie?
Yeah, it was.
God, the guy is just a genius. The guy has just always been legendary in what he does.
Yeah, well, he's a visual genius, and a lot of people panned what was the movie that he
Prometheus,
but
one of my favorite movies of all time. It really is. It's so good. Everything about it. That was the first time I ever knew who David Fassbender ever was. And I was like, hey, what a cool character he plays. Everybody needs to see Prometheus.
Well, so on that note, this is, what do we call it?
Good Halloween movie.
9732, which I believe is the apartment number.
I was wondering what that was. Cool.
Okay, so
we have an exciting show today, huh?
We do. We've got a couple of guests, so we probably got to keep moving on, because I guess our first one shows up at 10:15, which is Albert Skip Rizzo. Dr. Albert Skip Rizzo is a psychologist out at University of South California, and he'll be coming on our show to kind of talk about VR. As mentioned in the previous episode, VR in medicine. Obviously, from a psychological perspective, having something that immerses you to the point that tricks your mind may have some positives and some negatives. So we're going to talk about that. And then after that, we're going to be talking about with the makers of the Vuze camera. We kind of talked about it briefly last week, but this week, we're actually going to have them on. And why is the Vuze camera special in my mind? One, it's a stereo camera. And two, it's inexpensive, about $800. So why don't you head off with our first news item? Let's get going.
Awesome. Well, we have some updates, obviously. One is that the Sony VR is now available, which is crazy how quick that came. So you could head over to PlayStation.com and you can check it out. I don't know who has these in inventory yet, but I know that the PlayStation VR is available, compatible with the PlayStation 4. And they actually have a bit of content available too. So if you go into their game section, they've actually already got quite a few games already available. They've got this at launch. So they've got Arkham VR, which I still have not played the Batman franchise, the Arkham Asylum franchise, or any of those, the Arkham franchise. And I still have not even played this Star Wars Battlefront. But
it's awesome. So
is it okay? I gotta check it out. But apparently they've got a VR mission, X-Wing VR mission, and here's the content that's available so far. You can kind of see it. Valkyrie, obviously a big one that came to Oculus. That was an early launch, but then they've got Gran Turismo Sport, which that's the one that kind of caught my attention. Is this Gran Turismo has always been one of my favorites, and actually one of my friends and I, we this goes way back to the original Gran Turismo. We would stay up all night. One of my friends, he actually had he took one of the spare driver's seats that he had, like his dad's a car collector, and he had a driver's seat from a Mercedes. And then we got the Gran Turismo feedback controller, and we used to sit there and play it. Now it's going to be a whole nother level. You get yourself a force feedback steering wheel, which I'm sure they're going to have a new version for. And then, oh man, this is going to be fun.
Well, I've obviously played quite a few little mobile games, and one that really struck in my mind is some of these lower end flight simulators. Now, I played flight simulators in the past, and sometimes on 3 panels, but having it in VR where you look down and you see your cockpit, or you look out the windows, I mean, it really made
none of these short keys to go look that way, or none of this, it's so clunky. Exactly. The flight sims are so clunky, and they're one of my favorites is X-Plane, X-Plane, you ever play that one?
Mm-hmm.
That's a good one.
But imagine, and I'm hoping X-Plane, actually there is a version that you can get for the Oculus, as well as Valve, that is a flight simulator. It's pretty good, and I've tinkered with it. But it really gives you that sensation because, one, you're sitting down in an aircraft. But imagine when they tie that to actual physical controls that map directly in space. So when you pull your joystick or put your finger out, because when you have those sensors on your hands, and you can actually respond in your VR simulation.
Yeah.
Exactly. So a combination of the two, I think, is really going to be cool. And I think it looks like Skip is being quiet out there. He seems to have joined us, but waiting his turn. But I'd like to ask him about that, because I do know that he does both VR simulations, but it appears he also has some physicality with his VR experiences in PTSD. So we can ask him how important it is to tie the two together.
Well,
I've got a few lists. USA Today, obviously, many people are saying, hey, what's going to be out there? Well, Battlezone, you just mentioned. So head out to US Today. Job Simulator, this was available on the Valve. It's just fun to be able to go in there. And so that'll be available.
What is Job Simulator?
You'll have to see for yourself. I
gotta go play that one.
So, and then you've got obviously any of these mechanized combat leagues where you're sitting are going to be probably very popular, because they'll probably work very well. So, Chris, you seem to have crashed. You're breaking up a little bit. Hopefully, it's not on my end. So, I mean, obviously, there's a ton of games, as you just mentioned, and that's probably the important thing. And obviously, Oculus worked really hard to get developers when they launched, but it appears PlayStation seems to be the thing to have now. One, it's low cost, and I want to get my hands on, but they're already sold out. So who knows? I may get one in 2019. Who knows? But I don't even have I have a PlayStation 3, but this might be the new excuse to ramp up. Some people complain, why didn't they build their own Blu-ray into it? And I kind of agree, because all I use the PlayStation 3 for is, not Blu-ray, 4K Blu-ray. But I think they learned their lesson, because the original PlayStation was so expensive the PlayStation 3, because they put the Blu-ray in at the time.
But isn't Sony like the Blu-ray? Don't they own Blu-ray?
Well, they're part of the
They can
consortium.
make it however. I mean, the Blu-ray little laser is so cheap. Like, you'd think that Sony would be able to figure it out. Like, just don't charge yourself so much. Like, so weird.
Okay, well, let's go right into our next items so that we can run right into Skip here shortly. But let's see what we've got. So we got the Sony. Oh, this is kind of a cool item.
Yeah,
we
yeah.
talked about it before. It's the XYZ printer that some people are calling the easy bake of 3D. We'll see. But it appears to be colorful. This is one article, and there'll be several links to it. It's funny. One calls it XYZ, the other calls it Da Vinci. They're both the same company. You know, they have made a name for themselves in this country in 3D fabrication because they're low cost. And, you know, a lot of people complain, but they've refined them. They've worked on it, and they're...
Wow, this one doesn't look like it has the typical Da Vinci proprietary material.
Exactly. So it looks
Maybe
like
they're learning their lesson on that last, because I was going to say, red alert. Da Vinci's not really revered in the 3D community amongst the power users because it falls under the pitfalls of kind of the inkjet, kind of the problems that a lot of these inkjets, real low cost to buy the printer, the unit, but then they make it up when you use filament because they sell you it all in cartridges and it's all proprietary. Everything has to have a chip, kind of like the Stratasys machine. And so, but this looks like open reels, so that's good on them. For $249, geez, can't beat that.
No. You know, it's funny, and we've talked about it before. Remember we talked about the new Thing Maker from Mattel? Well, there was news, and I don't know if you were here that week, that they decided to postpone it till 2017.
Yeah,
I have a feeling it's because of XYZ. I don't think they were quite ready for it. They were supposed to have this relationship with Autodesk to provide the software, and that never happened. And so this gives this company the opportunity. Also, you know, there has been concerns about 3D printing in the consumer market, but I think part of it is cost and the ability to actually 3D print by the general public. So now bringing something in at 250, you know, gives you a little bit more attractiveness to this product because it's lower cost. Now, the other thing, will it be reliable? But it does seem to be a very simple device with a very small bed. So who knows? But at least it'll be more affordable. And some people have questioned MakerBot's push. And the other thing that's not mentioned here is that they're trying to push this into education too. And we talked about that last month, you remember, our educational market. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with this. Okay, so on to our next item. Hey, there's some other sneak peeks coming out.
Oh, this one's a good one. We got a little nugget, didn't we?
And I'll play the little video from this. Very quick, but there's some speculation.
Yeah, we saw. Hold on. Back it up a few frames there, huh? There we go. That's what we want right there.
So, you know, there's some speculation that this will be their new dual extruder, and
4 more days, right? We got it in 4 days. Yep. On Monday, it'll be premiering. So we got a launch event. Matter Hackers is actually doing an in-person launch event, so down in SoCal, and they're partnering up for the launch of some. They say it comes in 3s. Wow, look at this. This was made apparently on some new machine, and they say all good things come in 3s. So we can only imagine that this is going to roll out to the 3 machines that they have currently, the Ultimaker 2 plus the Ultimaker 2 and the Ultimaker Go, right? Those are the 3 machines they have. So, so we can only imagine that maybe we have some dual extruder stuff coming to the units.
Yeah, well, that's a good
I'm going to end up with an Ultimaker right behind me. If this is so.
Yeah. As you know, I've had both an Ultimaker 2 and an Ultimaker to Go, which I then donated to Stanford's medical team. I don't know what they're doing with it, but essentially it's an excellent printer. I'm glad that they came up to Go. They're a little pricey, but I think the quality is good, and they are very dedicated to support, you know, a lot like Luzbot. And they're international, and
And the community, they're like what MakerBot was supposed to be, and then they just stayed on the open source pathway. They have this great site. uMagine, in a lot of ways, has taken over Thingiverse. Thingiverse is still an excellent community, and there's still a lot of really great content. It's still kind of the king of 3D content out there. But I think uMagine is definitely, they're posting a lot of models. Ultimaker has been investing in some of these modelers that like people, not modelers like software, but actual people. Like we've had, what was the Ducati girl guy, right? And he came up with that windmill project, and really,
I'm the Ducati girl guy. You mean the guy who actually created the Ducati?
Ducati. I mean, yeah, you're the Ducati girl guy. The Ducati model, right? And they have all these models that Ultimaker has actually paid these modelers to pay for their model, and then they open source them. They put them out to the community for anybody to print them, which is like totally generous and awesome. I mean, it's marketing, but it's cool that, I mean, just the open source methodology that they use, and I mean, they put all the specs of the machine, the bill of materials, just like Lowell's bot. So they're definitely a leader to me. I have really always wanted to own a Ultimaker machine. The only drawbacks that I ever saw was number one, the Bowden. After having a couple machines with Bowden extruders, I would prefer the direct drive. But if this is a cool dual modeler machine, a dual material machine, then God, I could easily add one of these to the lineup.
I agree with you. But like you, I have concerns about the Bowden, but supposedly they redesigned it, and it's more durable and, most important, more reliable. So we shall see. You know what? Before we get into any of our other items, I do, because Skip is being very patient there. Let's go ahead and introduce him. We'll do a couple of more news items, and then we'll bring him. So I'm going to jump to this page. This is out at the University of California, or Southern California, Institute for Creative Technologies. So behind me, let me jump to that screen, is Dr. Albert Skip Rizzo. He's a, what is your actual title, Skip? Do you have sound?
Yeah, I'm a director of medical virtual reality. That's the official title. I'm also a professor within psychiatry and gerontology.
Wow. Well, welcome to the show.
Thank you. And
Thank you.
For those who are joining us, we actually have an interview, and I'll make sure that that's put in the show notes that we did, last year, and talked about some of these items. Well, Skip, it's exploded. VR is everywhere.
It's everywhere now.
It's like it's our dream come true. Both Skip and I kind of reminisced on some of the older products that we had worked with, and kind of talked about the old days. But now it's the new days, and there's all kinds of stuff. So let's go ahead.
What's really funny? Let me mention something real quick to connect into the last part of the show. When I saw that printer, that 3D printer for $249, it brought me back to my childhood. I don't know if you remember the VacuForm by Mattel. It was like a little heating unit, and you had little plastic items. You could make boats, and you can make jewelry. You can make all that stuff. Anyway.
This was before creepy crawlers. 'Cause we had the creepy crawlers. You had the vacuum form. Yeah, mine was I can still smell plastisol sometimes. I'll get like a whiff of plastisol. and be like, oh, I'm 12.
Yep, exactly. It brings you right back.
Well, on that note, Skip, Mattel has actually rechristened the name of their new 3D printer, like I mentioned, is not going to be available this year, the ThingMaker, which we had talked about on a previous show, bringing back memories for me. I remember at Christmas putting that goop in and baking it and coming out with my little trolls and things like that. So, yeah, exactly. I wonder if it was for the kids or for us nostalgic individuals. Okay, well, let's head on to our next item, and I think we're in, what are we in? 3D printer technology, yes, or we just finished that up. Yeah, yes, so we're now into design. I thought this was really cool, and let's make sure that I actually have the correct link.
Oh, great. NVIDIA is at it again.
Well, NVIDIA is always in the news.
They're just always, they are just constantly putting the pedal to the metal on all this stuff.
Now, this article from Road2VR doesn't actually have any footage, but it's basically a description But I see this, we've talked about this, and this is really the big reason I feel VR, from my perspective, is going to be pushed, and that is creating design elements in VR. And here, they have figured out how to actually bring in CAD functionality into a VR. So imagine having a demo, in this case, I guess it's a vehicle, that has every knob,
part,
bolt, and that you can, and they talk about it where you have a clipping sphere, so you can literally push it into things to get a cut-through view, and this is all in real time. And they talk about the number of polygons or faces down here. It's like 67.2 million polygons. Now again, that's nothing new to us, because when we design things in our CAD applications, we can do the same thing. Now, some people are saying, well, you're not going to have true graphical rendering, but just imagine being able to move models around, even in maybe simplistic monocolor, very simple shading. The fact is, to be able to do this will be, just wow. Now, they did say that you need a pretty powerful machine using like the Quattro P6000 based on the Pascal chipset, which are hefty, and also a beefy machine, but CAD users already have something like this already. So I'm really excited about this, and look forward to seeing more about it. But can you imagine being able to take something from a client with him and maybe run it through something like we're doing now, and he can put on his goggles and you both can explore it, pull a part out, maybe do some stress analysis and actually see it in front of you, get inside of it, have him next to you.
Yeah.
Say, oh, by the way, what do you think of this element here? So, this is just wowing me.
Right. Yeah, it's cool, man. I really love it.
Okay, so let's see. Do I have the next item?
I've got one. MIT.
Okay, well, go ahead and grab the MIT one.
MIT Foundry software is the Photoshop of 3D printing, they claim. This is according to Engadget. And, printing in multi-materials can, there's some machines out there like the PolyJet, or even MIT has their own multi-fab, which can print up to 10 different materials at a time. But you're still stuck with, how do I design this? And so sometimes you have to, obviously print things in basically like parts, separate bodies, and then combine them together. And so MIT has this new Foundry software that helps you identify different materials for different parts, and it helps you figure it out really rapidly, especially if you had like a ton of different parts that you needed to assign to this material or that. And so here's a little demo video of it. And so they're showing like a wheel. So here it is combined, and here they are helping figure it out. So yeah, because multi-material printing is obviously becoming kind of a real, it's going to be the next wave. So that's why Ultimaker, we'll see what Ultimaker comes up with on Monday. And, that Sigma printer by BCN 3D, they were kind of one of the first open source multi-material printers that has this new head system on it. And I don't know what Ultimaker is going to be using, but I know if they're investing in a new machine technology and they're doing a launch event, that they're going to have something cool to show us. So here it is. It's kind of selecting different parts of the model and able to kind of assign. You could print that black material in a rubber, and you could print that the white material maybe in a hard, rigid plastic. So that's kind of where, and that rigid plastic is like this lattice structure that kind of goes throughout the model. And what that does is add strength to where you're printing the rubber. There would be no other way to fabricate it. So here it is, printed object. Look at that, amazing. Here they are, the design models. They're showing off some of the models that they've got. A ski. And between composite materials and or some of these advanced materials, I was explaining to one of my to somebody that was in my office the other day, what's so crazy about this whole 3D printing the FDM thing is now we're seeing materials like, so injection molding, right? They have to be able to inject it into a mold and have it flow. So the materials that they use for injection molding have to fit a very specific criteria to flow properly into the mold and release and all those things. 3D printing doesn't have that same stuff. So we're seeing a lot of these materials come through the pipeline that don't have to meet injection molding criteria. They're specifically made for 3D printing. So we can actually 3D print a lot of parts that you couldn't injection mold, that you couldn't make through traditional manufacturing methods, or you couldn't even CNC them. So this whole multi-material wave is going to be kind of the next, I think the next leap that we're going to see in the next few months, few years is multi-material printing. So I think Ultimaker, between Ultimaker and MIT and a lot of big minds around it, we're going to see a lot of movement.
It's going to see some new shifts. Wish they would just bring down the cost, though.
It will. It will. It always does.
Okay, so let's move into one more item before we talk with Skip. But my item here, who remembers Windows? Windows has been around since what? 95? Actually, earlier than that. Late 80s, but it's been around. Something that's been around with it has been Microsoft Paint. Well, they want to join the 21st century, so they've come out with the new Microsoft Paint, and you can go out and get a test version now. So what have they added to it? Well, one, they've made it into the Windows 10, or whatever they call that look, the
Tablet.
Surface look, or the, well, you can use it on tablets, obviously, Surfaces, but they've added 3D. So now you can bring in 3D objects, paint the 3D objects, as you can see here, it's freehand, as you've seen there, and then look, you can paint it.
God, that's cool.
And, you know, I was hoping to show a demo, but obviously they're doing a better job. But you can head out there. There'll be a link on how to obtain this yourself. If you're running the latest version of Windows 10, it's critical that you, look at that, isn't that kind of fun?
That is wicked cool.
So, but it's the new Microsoft Paint. All right, so that's it.
Skip has his Microsoft cup.
HoloLens.
HoloLens.
Oh, HoloLens.
You have to tell us about your HoloLens.
Yes.
Apparently running.
Yeah, right.
So somebody must have a HoloLens then. All right, so Dr. Albert Skip Rizzo. So you've been on the show before, and we've kind of reminisced about earlier VR and this upcoming VR. Now, this was back in 2015. 2016, supposedly the year of VR. What do you think, Skip? Are we there?
Well, you know, I think we're on the path. I don't think we're quite there yet. I think, you know, we're still in the equipment frenzy mode. We're still waiting for real content. I mean, there's a lot of good content, let's face it, but certainly everybody's been excited. And, you know, it's almost like the presidential election where each day some new thing pops up. You know, we're having that same experience.
Good or bad. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, right. And there's been some bad in VR, actually.
Yeah, there has.
Yeah.
Okay.
But,
however, you know, why don't you kind of, I mean, you already did this already, but essentially you've been in this for decades now, and but you have a special niche, and you become, I'd say, famous with it, and that is applying virtual reality to phobias, PTSD, and other psychological issues. Can you kind of give us a summary of what this is about, and maybe kind of broaden that out a little bit about how do you think VR will play in medicine in general?
Yeah, sure. Well, you know, we got started in this back in the early 90s and actually started a lab in 1996 at USC focused on clinical virtual reality. And 1996, as you well know, coincided with perhaps the start of the nuclear winter of the first wave of virtual reality. You know, the whole bottom fell out. You know, there was a very similar kind of hype and excitement in the early 90s about VR. But the technology wasn't there to deliver on the vision. The vision, though, was sound. And on, you know, just a quick history, maybe 150, 200 people around the world at various labs pursued the idea of applying VR for clinical applications. And phobias was one of the first areas because the primary and best evidence-based treatment for treating phobias was called exposure therapy. And it's brain dead simple. I mean, take somebody who's got an irrational fear of something and make them approach it, you know, gradually over time. And eventually, if there's no inherent danger in whatever the person's afraid of, eventually by a process of behavioral extinction learning. I don't want to get too out in the weeds with these terms, but I may think of it as habituation maybe. You know, the person then can overcome their fear. Now, the thing is, you know, that kind of treatment was done in imagination only. And then people started to actually accompany, the therapist would accompany a patient to, say, if they had fear of flying, to an airport and sit in the airport for one session. And then back before 9/11, they could work out a deal with the airlines and go sit on a plane on the runway before it took off and then get off before it took off, and gradually help a patient in vivo expose themselves to their fears. Well, VR is perfectly matched for that. Number one, you couldn't get a lot of patients to do it in the real world. And number two, in imagination, you never know what's going on in the hidden world of imagination. So with VR, you could take phobics and you could get them to go in that glass elevator up the side of a Marriott hotel, or get them to sit on a virtual airplane, because they knew they weren't on the real thing. So you could get them to approach what they feared. And the interesting thing was, even though you could get them to do it, the brain reacted with the same kind of fear response. So they would, you know, the heart rate would go up, the sweaty palms, and you could do this kind of graduated exposure. And the good news was, back in the 90s, you didn't have to have intense graphics. Anything that had a whiff of what the person was afraid of, impoverished or not, you could, you know, get a person to react to it. And the real good news was that it transferred to the real world. So after people approached what they were fearful of and did it many, many repetitions, then you bring them to the real world site, and all of a sudden, because the brain's been kind of counter-conditioned in some sense, all of a sudden the extreme fear in the real world was lessened to the point where they could approach what they were fearful of and actually find out that it wasn't that bad. You know, and we're not talking about real fears. I mean, rational fears, like you don't run across the freeway at rush hour kind of fear. Which,
a tornado.
Yeah, right. It makes some sense to get down in the ground.
To be afraid of death and stuff.
Or put a Note 7 against your face.
But
you're talking about like ants or arachnophobia, like a fear of a spider.
Yes.
You know,
or even
so then you can have a VR where it's the spiders going everywhere. Ooh. See, I need that.
There are those environments. Those environments exist. Yeah.
I need that. I need that. I need to sit down with you, Doc.
And some people brought in the haptic stuff, like you're wearing a headset and you reach out, your hands being tracked, and you reach out towards a graphic of a spider that actually is a hairy, real, fake spider, you know, creepy crawler spider, and you all of a sudden touch it, and it's like, you know, these people jump out of their skin. Yeah, Hunter Hoffman did this back in '97. He was actually featured on the show Scientific American Frontiers.
Goosebumps, Doc. Goosebumps.
Yeah. Well, you know, and he had a client that they nicknamed Miss Muffet, of course. And this was a woman. You want to talk about extreme fear. She would every night duct tape in her bedroom the doors, the windows, run around spraying all kinds of toxic chemicals everywhere. It was like an hour-long ritual to prepare the room to sleep in, so she could get over her anxiety. She'd go in her car and she'd keep a cigar lit in the ashtray, because someone told her cigar smoke, you know, kept spiders away. And again, more toxic chemicals. Well, anyway, there's a great classic photo after she was going through treatment where she's got a Guianan bird-eating spider on her arm, and that was like the final measure of success. Mike, I'll send you that photo because it should be in the archives of classic old school VR. But you know, the neat thing about this is that you know, it was shown to have value even in a primitive state. But then it wasn't just for phobias. I mean, VR was well matched because you could put people in things they're afraid of and progressively help them get closer. But then we started doing things in cognitive assessment and rehab for people after brain injuries. As we got better with tracking movement, we started to do physical therapy. Hold on one second. Hey guys, I'm doing an interview. Can we just, sorry. Sorry, I have a family here. So we could start to do physical therapy and occupational therapy rehab where we're tracking the user's movement and putting the very boring and repetitive task of physical therapy after an injury or a brain injury or a neck injury, whatever. We could put it in a game and make it fun and engaging so people would actually do it. And so, all these areas percolated for the last 20 years where, you could do it, but it was a little costly. It wasn't that accessible, but the science evolved. And now we have one of the largest scientific literatures in any application area for VR in mental health, rehabilitation, that now we can leverage now that we have, extremely low cost and, available systems. As I said, I think in our last meeting, eventually these things are going to be like toasters. You might not use them every day, but every house will have one. And when that penetration happens, then you can start to push some kinds of healthcare, rehab, and so forth into the home, with a viable connection with a clinician. I still believe, that maybe some things can be self-help, but I think you still need a clinician's guidance throughout this treatment process. And that's the future we're looking at and the present that we're actually experiencing.
Okay, that's excellent. Can you touch, well, I hate to mention this because I think you'll probably talk a lot about it. One of the things that you've been in the news, at least in 2002, 2016, because I want to get into some of the actual technology with you as well. Some of the things that you have become more prominent with is your use of VR with Army veterans in the military for PTSD. That's gotten you a lot of attention. And one of the things I've noticed in some of your videos is that you show, and sadly I should have brought that up today, but you have them actually like in a Jeep or something with a headset on. What is the connection, and we talked about it a little bit on the show here, of using, let me jump to my screen, having yourself in a physical environment, but having the VR headset on to provide that external stimuli to the visual cortex. Do you think that there's a strong relation, obviously, because you do use that in that? And then I want to jump directly, and you can answer this question along with it. There is something that they call 360 videos, which I am now referring to as passive VR, and then obviously interactive VR, where you're actually moving around within the VR environment. So can you touch on all of these and how do they apply to what you're working with?
Yeah, sure. Well, when you use a mixed reality environment, like having a physical rendering of a Jeep, whether it's plywood or whatever, and then you wear the headset, you're just adding the haptic element into the scenario. And it may be a bit of overkill. And honestly, we haven't done kind of research where we compare the treatment outcomes, with just the visuals and the sound versus the visuals, the sound, the scent generator, the vibrating platform, the physical props, and so forth. We haven't compared clinical outcomes because, quite honestly, the goal was simply, let's throw everything but the kitchen sink and go multi-sensory to enhance clinical outcomes. And once we show that, this actually works in reducing the symptoms of PTSD, then then maybe somebody can do a doctoral dissertation, running one group with this amount of sensory stimuli, another group with, this amount, and so on, and do the comparison. So, clinical research is costly, time-consuming, hard to do right. So that hasn't been the focus. But, when it comes to 3D 360 video, I think there's a lot of really good application areas where that kind of real-world content, even though you can't interact with it so well, would add value. But with PTSD, the main idea here is to customize the virtual environment in real time around what the user's traumatic experience was.
That's heavy.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's hard medicine for a hard problem. There's no question about it. And it's very similar to the phobia work where you're helping a patient to confront and process very difficult emotional memories, because what they do in the real world is avoid thinking about any of these things. They never get past the point where it was a bad thing and I never want to see that again, and I got to run. You know, because you know, the disorder of PTSD. I mean, let's face it, war messes with people in a lot of ways, and we're not erasing memories. We're just trying to help people to cope with it. And unfortunately, people with PTSD, these are people that still feel as bad 5 years later as they felt the day after the event. They just don't shake it for whatever neurological reason. I really think it's a brain disorder, not a disease of the will or courage or anything like that. You know,
like,
and I'm not going to. Yeah, exactly. Like some political figures have maybe described it, but we won't get political, not yet. You know, so you know, our concept is confront and process. So you help the patient get, you know, not avoid, and do it in a safe place, so that as they, you know, they get back in that Humvee, or they go on a foot patrol through a Middle Eastern city, or they're in a remote mountain outpost taking mortar fire, they can talk about it. They describe their experience, and we, in real time, we have a clinician interface. In real time, we can hit a button and an explosion happens over there, or a helicopter flies over here, or the time of day, you know, shifts into early nighttime, and so forth. And you know, we have to customize everything to the specific, you know, experience of the user, and that's where 360 video isn't the right option for this. Now, back in the early 2000s, we did use 360 video. We built a bunch of anger management scenarios. So it was anger in the workplace, and basically we set up an old full view camera in front of a computer screen and a workspace, and we had actors walk in and holler at the camera and abuse the camera and sexually harass the camera. And we would put users in that and teach them ways that they might be able to cope with these kinds of things, or teach them assertive responding rather than aggressive responding. And you know, it sounds crazy, but
I was just thinking of all the obnoxious options here that you could come up with.
You know, and that was a fun project to build, actually, because you know, it was so easy to think. Everybody had a good story about, you know, the kind of abuse they had in the office, and I said, well, let's think on the positive end. Let's make some positive work experiences. And the actors, which essentially were lab partners, they had a hard time acting the good stuff out. Everybody could act out the angry stuff really well. You son of a, you know, you're parked in my spot. You know, I had your car towed. You know, or
yeah.
You know,
let's use
it out of your system.
Let's use that as a segue, Skip. So you mentioned about having to deal with your anger there. Now, what if you put positional trackers where you can walk around, and hand controllers where you could actually lash out physically? So, and obviously the product that comes to mind, the consumer product, is the HTC Vive. So I'm assuming you've had a chance to play with that. How do you think that is helping in all the things that you've mentioned, now that you can actually interact with objects and literally walk around in that environment?
Yeah, I think that where the Vive will come in really handy as we move our software, all of our software, into it. We'll actually be demoing some of our VR PTSD scenarios in the Vive at the upcoming ITSEC conference, the military simulation conference in Florida. It's a
Hello?
We might have cut him out. He might have dropped out here.
Well, let's hope that he can make it back.
Really good, I think.
Okay,
but
there we go.
Good. He dropped out for just a moment. Skip about 10 seconds, so if you could rewind just a little bit.
Oh, sure. The real value, I think, with using the Vive in these kinds of scenarios is, while the controllers are good for a number of things, object selection, manipulation, and so on, it's a 6th degree of freedom tracking where the value is, because previously we just used, you know, an InnerSense tracker on an old Sony TMZ3 or whatever, and you had an orientation head movement, but you couldn't bend down or look around a corner, and that was unnatural in a lot of, like, say, foot patrol scenarios where you'd be coming around a corner and you couldn't, you would see users try to bend and gradually look around the corner, because you don't just brazenly walk around a corner in a provocative wartime environment. That's how you get killed. But now that you can get on the ground and you can look around and have that 3 degree of freedom tracker that the 2 cameras allow, that is a major plus for increasing the naturalness of the environment. Now, how this is going to play out in a clinician's office may be a different story, because you can't, most clinicians don't have giant offices and set up. We're going to experiment with that. And in that case, perhaps the Oculus may be, this minimum level of sufficient, where you're sitting in a chair, or you're in a, a 3x4 space, and you can get the same kind of tracking. I think, the field of view, the resolution, the smoother tracking, these are all things that are going to increase, the impact of the therapy. And we just got to make sure it's not overly complex for clinicians, because let's face it, we're at home with this stuff, but, I go to conferences and I ask, before I start a talk at a psychology conference, and I'll hold up a Gear VR and I'll say, how many people out there have had a VR experience? And I'm shocked that only like maybe 10% of people raise their hand. So I toss the gear out there and let them pass it around while I'm talking. I'm seeing jaws drop as they first, put it up to their head and look. And then somebody next to them says, turn your head. And, that kind of experience.
It's unreal the first time you do it. I mean, I have people in my office all the time, and I put the Oculus on them, and I love it. Part of the reason I got it is just to watch other people enjoy it, because it's like I equate it to like when we got Nintendo 64. I was like, 3D video games was the first time we saw 3D video games. I was like, are you kidding me? It just blew our whole world wide open. Yeah, it's totally the same thing. I wanted to just ask you one quick thing, and it's a little off script. Have you, so my thing is like all this whole brain, right? That you're dealing with these whole brain kind of, I guess you call it a disorder, right? A whole brain disorder. Mm-hmm. So I find that like the Oculus, it's visual, so it's definitely tapping into both sides of the brain, but most circumstances you're in with visually, a lot of people are very much a left brain type of person. Like I'm very much left brain, and I've recently got into like reading with my left hand, because it taps into your right brain, right? So like if you speed read with your left hand as a pacer, you can actually do more whole brain. And I've actually connected with fiction reading for the first time in my life, doing that and enjoying it. And so my thought is like with some of these disorders, like, because smell is very much a right brain type. So I could see maybe some smell type things, whether it's dust, dirt, when you're in a situation connecting you to the scenario. Have you seen any smell, like VR type stuff? Have you seen anything as a product?
Well, there's the scent machine that we use is by a company called EnviroScent, and they make commercial products that you never see, but they exist at airports. When you walk by a Cinnabon and you smell the fresh baked Cinnabon, they're not baking at the airport. That's a fake scent to induce you to eat.
I swear I saw a bus drive by with a Panda Express orange chicken billboard on it, and it smelled like orange chicken as it drove by. I swear I saw that.
Yeah. So these companies,
it's a company that actually makes it.
Chris, don't mix it up with those colorful drugs you take.
Oh yeah.
But in our case, for the PTSD work, we don't have any nice smells. We have one nice smell. It's called Middle Eastern spice, and it's just like if you went into a nice area, you might smell this. But most of them are nasty smells, like gunpowder, cordite, rotting garbage, burning rubber, diesel fuel.
So you are already on this.
Yeah. It's a very expensive machine, though. It's the most expensive component of the whole system, and not all use it, because it's like $3,000. It's got a compressor and it pumps air over these little vials of scent impregnated pellets. I've been approached by a number of companies that are trying to produce low cost systems that would be appealing maybe for the gaming market. And I'm of mixed mind about this. I find that I have a hard time differentiating the scents of different smells, You can smell a rose, all the perfume scents, that technology has evolved. Some of the more custom scents that we might want to have in a game to make it more realistic, it's 50-50. Some, like in our stuff, some clients in treatment, as soon as you put on that scent generator or diesel fuel after, a vehicle has exploded, they're like, oh my God, it's like I'm back there again. But other people, it's just like, ooh, I can't tell, but that's a bad smell. What are we doing here? So the brain, as you say, everybody's brain is sort of wired a little bit differently when it comes to sensory perception, and how impactful at the time, in this case of the trauma, was that smell. I imagine during a traumatic experience, your brain is in full-on overdrive. It's overloaded with emotional and cognitive stuff. It may just imprint that sense. So anytime I had a Vietnam era vet that couldn't walk by any kind of Asian restaurant because it would just bring back, and that, wow. So that's not a good thing to have in Los Angeles.
yeah, seriously.
Or San Francisco.
Yeah, so you answered my question. So, and the company name that makes this product is called Enviroscent?
Enviroscent, yeah. Huh. And, after the show, I can send you a link to their stuff. But there are a couple companies that have produced these things. And Jackie Morey, who I think you may know, she invented a scent collar that people could actually wear, and it had little devices with a small amount of scent that could puff up a scent. But it's hard to work with it, because the challenge you have with any scent generator is that you don't want it to stick to someone's clothes so that they smell like, a nasty wartime thing for the next 3 days.
Yeah, for sure.
Also, evacuating one scent to make the next scent perceptible is a big issue too. So you got to have a fan that turns on and clears the space a little bit. So it becomes a complicated thing. And I think that'll be the challenge if you ever want to bring this into a game type context in the home. Is that going to be the stinky room that people play games in, because these scents may stick on the walls and stick on the table?
Yeah, or maybe it doesn't even.
You actually have to get moving on. So I wish I would have known you were going to ask that question, Chris. So obviously we've talked about a lot of the positives, but from a research perspective on your part, there are some, may we say, negatives as far as VR. And, one of them that is in the news a lot is the pornification of VR. And how does that, what is your conversations within the research as far as from that perspective, and other negative aspects about people losing the ability to contact with other people, have real relationships? This was the issue with video gaming, the internet, and so forth. How are you dealing with that, and are you actually working with that within your research?
Well, we haven't addressed it as a research topic, but, pay attention to it as clinical psychologists and, socially aware folks. And, I think as far as the VR porn thing goes, I think it's going to be the same thing as, videos and, before that, magazines and so on. It's going to be another media form to deliver that stuff. I don't think it's going to replace. What's it going to replace? Is it going to replace, somebody who doesn't have a lot of opportunities and is already engaged in a deep amount of porn? Are they going to, I don't know if it's going to supplant connection in the real world. But then again, I've never tried it, so I don't know. What I do have a strong ethical worry about, though, is if VR porn starts to go off into deeper directions of, socially reprehensible activities. So what about if, somebody produces a child sexual abuse scenario? It will happen.
Oof.
Yeah, it will happen.
Mm-hmm.
And actually legally it can happen. The Supreme Court already weighed in. They, right now, if somebody gets caught with pictures of children, photographs of children, they go right to jail. No bail, and that's a slam dunk pretty much. But a fella got caught with graphic, computer graphic generated imagery of naked children and all that, and compromised things, all the sick shit you can think of. And it went to the Supreme Court, and they said because the renderings don't actually represent a real person, there's no real person harmed in the creation of it, that this person could have any kind of graphic generated porn and not violate any laws. So that opens the door for, you know, some sick son of a bee creating, you know, virtual child scenarios. Now, some people might say, well, will that create will that create a thing that will reduce incidents? Will people work out their fantasies in a VR world, or will it exaggerate their desire to actually do it in the real world? These are empirical questions. You know, psychology as a science has been around for 100 years or so, studying human behavior in the real world. Now psychology's got to catch up with studying human behavior and interaction in the virtual world, because it's going to be coming on strong in the next couple of years. And these are things we have to have an ethical, you know, vigilance for.
Wow.
Well, and as you know, Skip, my wife is a clinical psychotherapist, has been for 30 years, and these are the concerns she's seeing already as far as internet porn, things like that, couples dealing with that on an ongoing basis. And now we have VR, which provides even a more immersive experience to keep people out of their relationships and so forth. So I was just wondering if you had actually started to work with that yet. But it is a concern, and we'll probably be seeing, as you mentioned, we have to deal with it like we've dealt with everything through history. So Skip, I really appreciate you being on. I've kind of set these up back to back. We have, if you want to stay on with us, we have Jim from Vuze Camera. He actually has this super, I would just say inexpensive Vuze. I'm sorry. What'd you say, Chris?
Views.
Well, maybe Jim can tell. Is it Vuze? Vuze? Vuze?
We got no audio from him.
Yeah, not getting any audio, Jim. So we have him coming on. You might be interested, because what I covered last week, and I also did some experimentation on, is actually putting in a VR camera. My wife had some foot surgery, and I worked with the doctor, and we actually created some 360 video of that. And I also created a 220-degree stereo. But the Vuze camera has the ability of doing full 360 in stereo. And I have a couple of clips that I'll show in a moment. If you've got your old anaglyph glasses, you'll see the potential. And plus, if I remember correctly, Jim, it's about $800. So it's significantly less than the only other competitor that I can think of, which is the Nokia Uzo, if I remember, Ozo, which is like a $25,000. I think it dropped down to less than 20. But it's a very expensive camera. And man, have I been chomping at the bit to get my hands on it, because as we talked about, passive VR still has obviously a great use in providing more immersive in, let's say, in surgery and other things. And so that's kind of thing that I'm exploring now. So I'm glad that they're coming on. So, you know, Skip, you're welcome to stay with us, but I really appreciate you coming on and giving us a perspective.
Very interesting conversation.
So thank
Always
you,
a pleasure. I got 10 minutes left. I scheduled it to 11, so I'll hang for 10 just because you guys are fun.
Thank you, Skip. All right, Jim, are you with us now?
Hit the little cog in the top, up in your Google Hangout. There's a cog, and you might have to select your headset or whatever your microphone device is. And nothing. Oh, no, we got to humanize.
So, yeah, you should have, as you mentioned, a cog. It has a little person off to the left-hand side on the red, on the right-hand side.
Yeah, there we go. We got you.
There we go. Excellent.
There you go. I actually had to go to the settings drop-down menu anyway.
There we go. Hey, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Jim.
Hey, my pleasure. Good to be here. I was nice listening to the intro, even though I couldn't chime in. So,
yeah. Well, I mean, I'm really excited about this camera. And as you know, I've been sending constant emails, hoping to get a prototype or a beta version to actually put in the field and put to use. But sadly, it wasn't available in October. I'm hoping November.
Bring up a video or something of this thing, Mike. Show us what it is.
Okay. No, we're just gonna have our pitch on Jim. Just give me a moment here. Jeez.
There you go. You get that started. I'll tell you that, trust me, I'm waiting for one as well that's not one of our production units, right? So we are working right now to get everything in place and everything tuned and ready to go. So you're right, we're going to miss October. I'm hoping November, but no guarantees.
Got it. Okay. And Jim, where do you fit into this Vuze? What do you do at Vuze?
There you go. Well, I actually joined, so the parent company of Vuze is a company called Humanize. And humanized technology has been around for about 16 years. And what humanized does is they specialize in 3D printing on flat substrate. So you might know the term lenticular lenses, right? So you see it a lot in like bookmarks and advertising and this type of stuff, where they print 3D on a flat sheet, and depending on how you look at it, you can take a different point of view. So that's what humanized has been doing. And in the back end, they got about 70 patents, and a lot of that is all tied into 3D modeling and 3D software. So they decided about 2 years ago to enter the hardware business. I recently joined, I came out of Ricoh. I launched the Ricoh Theta in the 360 space there, and then I joined over to spend some time over here at Vuze, or Humanized, because I like what they're doing with the Vuze camera.
So if you've got your anaglyph glasses, put them on now, because that's the only way to experience this. I'll go ahead and rotate my camera here. This is a demo, if I remember, of a bike shop where the guy gives us a tour. But unless you have your, I mean, obviously if you're looking at this in Google Cardboard, you can put it up to your face and truly feel like you're part of it. And that is the important thing behind what I call Stereo 360 Spherical. And because it gives you, because I can actually turn around and look behind me now, but because it gives you that extra depth information, it's like you're really there. And even though you can't interact with any of the objects, move or anything, the fact is you do feel like you're confined within this corridor here of shelving. And I really like...
What? And this is a guy, does he have it on a selfie stick?
It's exactly what he did, yep. He's holding it on a selfie stick.
I gotta have one of these.
Well, you're going to. I'm going to bring it to your shop, and we're going to do a tour this way.
And you could just, what? This is already happening. This is already, okay. So this is like a contender for the GoPro thing.
You know, it really is changing the game when it comes to the kind of video VR experience. And I was listening to some of the terms that you use. You know, we talk about time-shifting locations and, you know, true life VR and all kinds of different approaches. It'll be interesting to see where the industry comes down. But in order to be fully immersive, right, you have to have not only the full spherical world around you, but you need the depth perception. You need the 3D. And so what we've done with the Vuze camera is we've developed, in fact, I got one here. I'll show you, if you can see.
Yeah. Oh, so let me bounce back to your camera.
Oh, yeah, there you go. So that's a dev unit.
This is a dev unit. And what it is there are lenses on each side. So there's a pair of lenses on each side.
Stereoscopic.
Yep. So we get stereoscopic. One obviously is representing
just like my eyes.
That's right. So they are actually spaced the average distance of the human eyes. Clever, we have the name human eyes, but you know, this is
what's the exact amount, the IPD that you're using? Is it about
5.8 centimeters, 5.85 centimeters.
Okay, 58 millimeters then.
Yep.
Mike doesn't like to get technical or anything.
There you go.
Well, it's important because when you design the glasses, which is what I do, that's extremely important, and they need to correspond fairly much. So you're using about 58 millimeters, which is an important point. I designed mine for about 63 millimeters, and there's some reasons for that because you can move them a little bit.
So and the reason we're going a little bit narrow is because when you put in a headset, and the headset you're looking at a narrow field of view and magnifying it, it actually, if you go all the way out to 63, 64, it actually puts too much depth in. It looks exaggerated and looks fake. So we did a lot of testing
as well.
Yeah, so we did a lot of testing to figure out that interpupil distance of 58 really gives you a true life, I feel like I'm there, right? And everything seems to have the right aspect ratio and size.
Well, another thing that's important, and I'm going to run this other video behind me, somebody is actually using your camera to create a little video short.
What are we doing?
Well, it's
not another one of these, Mike. Not another one of these.
It's a trailer, and it appears that there's some drug usage here. I didn't watch it completely.
Living in
this is 2D only. But what I wanted to point out, and again, the quality you're going to get here is only 720, so the links will be in the show notes, so you can see this in actual 4K. Is the dynamics of the camera. A lot of the cameras, including the Gear 360, in my opinion, have limited dynamic range. But look at the color. I mean, here's some lighting. Obviously, they probably had some professional lighting in here. But look at the quality of the image. And again, this is 360. Okay. And here it looks like
so it's a movie. That was like
of all the trailers to pull up. I mean, that was fun.
Mike, come on, give us something good here.
Well, I did the first one.
Yeah, I know.
So here we'll okay. How about this? We'll actually
let's take a look at the actual product. Yeah. So yeah, this looks like a really cool little product.
It is, and you know what? It's really a powerhouse. So let me step through a little bit of what we do in the camera.
4K
and how it works.
Too.
It's 4K per eye. So 2K. What we do is we are using 4 lenses to create the image for your left eye, and the other 4 for your right eye. Now, each one of those sensors is a little more than 2 megapixels, right? So we have 8 megapixels worth of data. But with overlapping and stitching and all of the other pieces that go with that, we're able to create a very clean 4K signal per eye. So the final file that you get out of this when it's done is actually an 8K per frame video. And that way you're actually feeding 4K to each eye, which exceeds what any playback device can do right now. So the image quality is actually being dictated by the headset itself.
And which is extremely important. So what is the actual image elements themselves for each camera?
What do you mean?
Each camera, what is their resolution?
Each one is full HD, 1920 by 1080, okay. 30 frames per second.
Okay, and then your final output is 3860, or can you go one step above that?
It's 3860.
Okay.
3860 by 21 or 20. I don't remember the actual number right offhand, but that is what our final file is. We do it in an over-under file format.
Okay.
And it seems to get picked up just fine. You know, I've used a number of different applications to play it back, and it seems to go. Other than the fact that it's a huge file, right? There's a lot of data there.
Yeah, I totally agree. As you're probably aware of, I've been playing with this for about a year now. I've done both renders within Unity as well as Unreal, and actually working with cameras. Often I can't point my camera, but I've been using a combination of gaming as well as 2D cameras. So as you can imagine, when I saw this camera plus its price, because sadly I can't afford an Ozo, I said, wow. Now again, this was $800?
Yeah, so it's $800. You can pre-order it now at $800, and we're also going to throw in with that $800 the camera, a headset that you can put your mobile device into, a selfie stick that cleverly turns into a tripod, and then all the software to make it happen. And really, it's the software is a big part of the component that makes this work for us. And if you were to go with, I don't care who it is, go with the Ozo rig, Jaunt rig, the GoPro. In order to do 360 3D with GoPro,
you're 16 cameras or something like that.
Yeah, it's 30 cameras. It's a $30,000 rig.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're dealing with.
This is like the newest thing, huh? This is the great. This is it right here. This is the cool one.
Right. And the reason we're able to do it for $800, not only $800, but it's because we made our own software, our own stitching software. And if you could, if you wanted to take the 8 video feeds out of this camera and go on your own. We advise against that, because what we do after manufacturing the camera is we put it in a control room, and then we actually take an image with it, a series of images, and we can calibrate that camera. And we know exactly how every sensor is placed at manufacturing, any lens component issue changes, anything. We actually put an offset file in the firmware. So when you connect your camera or transfer your memory card over, that data file goes with it. That way, when we stitch, we apply the offset data specifically to that stitch, and that helps us speed into a nice clean environment and eliminate some of those errors.
Now, I'm assuming your software will be able to immediately push up to, let's see, Facebook or YouTube?
So we have to define immediately. So what we do is we actually capture in the camera itself using a memory card. We store it'd be about an hour worth of video on a 64 gig card. Takes about a gig per minute of data. Put that onto the computer. When you render it, when you process it and stitch it all together, it takes about a minute to process 1 minute of video, depending on, almost 1-to-1, but it's dependent on your GPU, right? It's not so much dependent on your CPU, but it's your GPU. So for example, if you are using the NVIDIA 1070, rendering times are about 30 seconds for 1 minute of video.
Wow. So if somebody can afford a 1060, probably 1-to-1?
Yeah, 1060. The 970M is about 1-to-1. So
that's good. It's a laptop.
It is. Yep. So that allows us. So we transfer it over. We stitch it. Then once it's all stitched, like I said, let's just for the sake of this discussion say it's minute to minute. Then what we can do is you choose how you want to output it, right? So if you're going to output to a flat video file to go up to YouTube or Facebook, you can designate what you want and send it off. If you want a reduced resolution version, you define it, or if you want full resolution, you define it, and we output it out, and you can do whatever you want with the video.
So as you know, one of my questions was, will you have the ability to stream? One of the things that YouTube Live provides, if you provide it proper equirectangular video, it will then create a 360 from it. But as you know, there are very few cameras that are capable of doing that, especially in stereo. Is that something you're going to be pursuing, or is it strictly SD card at this point?
You know, it's something that we're looking at. We know that there's a lot of interest out there. There's also a number of players that are out there doing streaming 2D video. So what we're looking at is, number one, where is the critical business case for streaming 3D, and is that market segment large enough? Right now, what we're focusing on is producing the world's, well, I'll call it the world's only cost-effective, however you want to define that, 3D 360 solution. So Ozo's at $45,000. We talked about GoPro it being $30,000 and down that, plus the software and the computers and the frustration and everything else in the back end. So right now we're focused on capture and create. And in the future, if those business cases come up that say, you know what, we need, for example, telemedicine or teletraining of some sort, where 3D becomes a key component to it, then yes, that will be part of a future roadmap. But there's a lot of study that has to happen because, quite frankly, the bottleneck is data upload. Right? So a lot of people have got a nice fast pipe into their house and they can download pretty quick, but it takes some special going to get a high enough bandwidth up into the cloud.
Well, for example, our show here is only 720 through YouTube Live. So even though you can go 1080, your pipe has to be 2 to 3 times that in order to provide non-interruptive video. So let's move on to the final. As mentioned, one of the reasons that I was hoping to have you on is that I've been experimenting with VR in medicine by actually bringing, as I call it, passive VR or video cameras into the surgical room. And you showed a brief part of that trailer. And having Skip on from that particular point, do you already have customers looking at pursuing that? Has there been interest in it? Is that something in your own business plan? Can you give us a little bit more? And maybe, Skip, if you're still here and want to chime in, you're welcome to.
Sure.
So the medical market is certainly shown interest, right? A lot. Primarily around radiation, where we're hearing it right now. Not assisted surgeries or anything like that, but from a capturing the live environment and being able to use that later on to teach or to develop different techniques, these types of things, those are the discussions that we've had. Now, I've had some interesting conversations with people who are using other solutions in VR. So, for example, they're taking an MRI. I was talking to a brain surgeon, and I don't know all the terminology, but he's a brain surgeon. He takes the MRI, and then what it allows him to do is he can put on a set of goggles and look at the MRI in 3D 360 and see the backside of where he's cutting or where his operational site is. So not only does he have a view of what he can see in the surgical site itself, but more importantly, he could see something he could never see before. So he could tell how deep he can cut or what structures are behind, if there's critical members and all that type of stuff on the back end. That's not something that the capture side of things is going to solve per se, but we'll make a tool that certainly can capture the world world.
Okay. Skip, how do you think you could use this?
Oh, well, I think there's a lot of applications where, you know, like you're talking about training right now, training doctors or, but, you know, think about it from a patient perspective. I've been talking to Leslie Saxon about this and preparing people for surgery by putting them through the pre-process in VR and explaining what's going to happen next and preparing them for the different elements of what's going to go on. That may be a way that, you know, something like this can be used, where you script this out and you give people a little bit of an advanced idea so they can better emotionally prepare for what they're going to have to go through. So I think that's you know, one useful area in the same domain. But, you know, this camera looks incredible. I'm going to go online after this call and pre-order one now. There's just, you know, 1,000 applications where capturing the real world in stereo like this can be applied clinically. It's just great.
So do you think the stereo capability is important?
I think so. I mean, it's a trade-off, again, as you know, you were saying about, you know, download times and making it accessible and how big are the files and everything. But I think that'll become less of an issue as, you know, we continue to move into the future and faster from, you know, faster, you know, computer connections, bandwidth and so forth. I think stereo does matter. You know, we're just starting to move some of our virtual human stuff that's traditionally been on a big flat screen for training, you know, psychosocial skills and things like that. And we're moving it into the Vive. And the trippy experience I had recently was the first time I was popped in to see one of our virtual characters in the Vive. They accidentally put me nose to nose with this very attractive virtual human female. And I had an emotional reaction, like I had violated her personal space, you know, and I jumped back, you know, an anti-Trump move, actually, I might have to add, you know, where I felt I violated something just by being that close to this character. So my feeling is stereo does matter in certain circumstances, and it can be, I think there's a lot of good research to be done as to the emotional evocativeness of stereo versus, you know, mono delivery of this kind of content.
And you're going down a really interesting path, because we talk about virtual presence and you know, virtual tours, these types of things. Yeah, I got a Vive, and one of the games that come with it is Plank, right? So you walk out there and you can look down and, you know, test your nerves, right? But what this product does, because of the depth perception, is you can actually take real world environments and cost effectively put a patient into an environment that maybe otherwise would be unsafe to put them in for reaction. It's really interesting. I hadn't thought about going down that path.
Yeah.
Well, and also one of the things that I'm exploring right now is, because you have a sphere, and obviously you have a stereo sphere, you can then supplant it, you know, basically turn it into a cube map in video, so that you have real surroundings around a virtual, let's say out of Unity or even Unreal. So you combine the two together in order to create an experience that you wouldn't have otherwise. So that's one of the things that I'm working on right now, which is why I wanted this camera really quick. Because then you have the ability to create a realistic cube map that is also a video. And I see huge potential there. And you know, as Skip mentioned, just the fact is that you can now have that depth information, which I found vital in just even my 220-degree dual Chinese camera system, and putting that together. What you get out of actually seeing a foot that's coming towards you, or when the surgeon here turns his scalpel towards you, it has a little bit different significance when that scalpel actually has some depth to it and glints off the light than just a 2D flat object. So I see some huge potential here from both as a patient perspective and also for the doctor, because he can now gauge depth and the size of objects, which is really difficult to do. So Jim, I know I kind of talk the last minute. I'm going to put up the screen that identifies the kit if you want to put in a few last words, and then
I have, and maybe you can lead us off with this, or you can sign off with you can check content out apparently on Vuze.camera/showroom, and you can, if you already have an Oculus and you have a web VR enabled on your Chrome browser, which I just found out about on your website. Yep. You can actually check footage out that you guys have taken on this camera. Is that right?
That's right. You can actually download the full resolution files. So, and if you have something as simple as a little set of glasses,
that's the
like
Hamido, what do they call them?
The micros. I think they call them micros.
Yeah. So I understood correctly, you've actually got a partnership with Hamido, right? That's whose headset you're supplying?
Yeah, correct. We are supplying their headset with our kit for pre-bundles. But this is the easiest way to get started. Then you go into cardboard, then you can go into the Oculus headset, then you can go on and on. But when we talk to people and show them that magnifying their screen is really what the whole VR world is about, they kind of get a little bit surprised that, wow, that's the limiting factor right now, is the quality of the screens.
Exactly. And that's improving, but behind that, as you're aware of, as you improve the resolution of the screen, the horsepower behind it to drive those pixels has to improve as well. So it's always, but we're moving forward with it.
Well, when I first started in the imaging industry, we took pictures onto a floppy disk in 640, 480 resolution. So.
I was there. I was alive, and I saw that.
Well, if you've heard of the word perfect,
it wasn't a Polaroid. It was actually a 3.5-inch disc.
That's right.
Crazy.
It's called the Mavica by Sony, and
we've come so far.
That was already ahead of the game. The real product was the Quick Take 100 from Apple.
Yeah, the Apple. Yeah, that's right, and it was. And then the Casio. It was this whole.
We're going down memory lane right now. So I want to thank all of you for coming on. If you're interested in the Vuze, it comes in 3 different colors, or actually 4, right? Yellow, red, black, and blue.
Oh, I'm getting the black one of these.
So am I. And not only does it include the camera, but it includes a headset. And as Jim mentioned, the software is extremely important. I have found that out. Even though I build a camera system, a plug-in itself can be anywhere between $300, and you still require After Effects. And if you buy something standalone, it can be thousands of dollars. That's included with it. So, I'm not trying to make this into a late-night infomercial, but I think they've got something here. If you're interested in it, please head out there. Jim, you got the last word before we sign both of you off and move on with some more of our items, because my wife's going to kill me if I stay on this show too long.
My last piece will be cinematic VR is really a future piece, putting tools, cost-effective tools into people's hands to start creating content. There are so many imaginations out there that are going to deliver amazing things. So don't sit on the sidelines. Get involved in the category. It's going to be huge.
Awesome.
And Vuze is making it possible with a low-cost camera. Thank you. All right, Chris, take us into our next item.
Okay. Well, I think we're going to jump ahead to Scanner Darkly. I just had a really cool thing that I found on YouTube, and it's VolumeDeform, which is this. This is a trip. We got to pull this up. I got to show this. This is this is like one of those technical paper type things, and it's one of those like technical type things that they're showing off on YouTube, and it's kind of playing on something that we've seen before, but this one is like actually reconstructing models based on live warping. So they can actually take like scan data depth input from a sensor, and you can go check this out. Just type in VolumeDeform ECCV 2016 in your YouTube, and this will come up. And this is some research, obviously, and I wanted to thank Matthias Neisner. I hope I'm saying his name right. But they're showing like a guy like in a hood, right? And he's bending all around. And they're reconstructing a 3D model based on like the warping of the object. And so I see this having incredible impact in the scanning, because this way, like the person doesn't have to even be standing still for a scan. Like, because normally, like right now, the way we do it is, you know, like the person has to be pretty still to get a good scan. This is like, it can recognize when what's moving and warping, and it can actually reconstruct the model. And so, and they compare it, at the end of the video, they kind of compare it to some different reconstruction methods that are already out there. So here they are showing depth input, color input, and then the canonical model is the one that you watch kind of to see them generate that model. And then the live warped reconstruction is actually like the part that just trips me out, the fact that they can actually reconstruct it.
That, yeah, that is pretty cool.
Yeah, and so here they are. They're showing it with what they call SIFT, SIFT. And here they are showing it with and without SIFT. And showing some reconstruction.
Well, you know what, I can see the potential here is when we were just talking about using 360 depth cameras, or not depth, but stereo cameras to capture depth. But imagine being able to capture animation of 3D objects like this and record them to be able to bring into a game without having to rig it and create animations.
Yeah, wait until structure and Vuze partner up, right? You have a structure Vuze, like a VR structure. But look at this model. This is cool. This is showing a face with facial tracking, and then they put it back on the live canonical model and show the, I mean, it's crazy what these what these researchers are coming up with. So, I mean, you know, obviously still in the research phase, but I mean, only a matter of time before.
Well, it's the research that gets bought or applied by others, and the next thing you know, a year from now, we have a product. I mean, the iteration process is so quick now. All right, Chris, let me run into my next unit.
Cool.
And this is, you know, a continuation of our VR corner and around room, which was an ongoing thing today. And in this particular one, you know, one of the problems, as you know, is that you need a beefy machine, but it's tied with an umbilical cord to your headset. So imagine if you could remove that umbilical cord. So, you know, maybe you ask this question or somebody else, and why don't you just use Wi-Fi? Well, the problem with Wi-Fi is latency and the ability to push the bandwidth necessary. So there's been a company that we've talked about before, Nitiro, that has created a chipset to do just that. And it appears that Valve has put a significant amount of investment in this company in order to do this. And, you know, I had heard about this earlier, but it appears like this is a real thing now. So they use a 60 gigahertz wireless solution, but essentially you're going to pipe in this information into this chipset, and ability now is to have just the headset and its sensors that ties to your computer with no wires. That will be important, if I emphasize that enough. So I mean, it's pretty cool. Currently what you're seeing is basically building computers that you attach to your body to provide that. The sad thing is, to keep them lightweight and mobile and powered requires a fine balance. And as you can tell, using, you know, Google VR or even the Gear VR, those who can still use it, there's some limitations. So to see this actually happening, I think it'll be cool. You wouldn't have to put a backpack on, which again is also a limited machine with limited power resources and time. So I'm really looking forward to seeing more on this. And, you know, Valve is really hitting the mark. They bring in a lot of cool technology, but at a very minimal cost. I mean, those lighthouses, what they cost and what makes them cool is super, and then we're now seeing that in other areas. All right, so let's run right into your Printwhisperer, and then I'll finish it up with the Spelunking in the Tech Cave.
I can't do the Printwhisperer without seeing the image, though. We've got to bring it up. The Printwhisperer image.
Okay, let's see. Do I still have it? Do we need some music to go along with it? Down the range. Down the range comes the Printwhisperer.
Thank you. That's a proper introduction. Okay, the Printwhisperer I have a tool for you today. So calipers, obviously, we've gone over calipers. We've just run that Printwhisperer tip into the ground. So what about angles, right? Angles are a pain in the neck, man. And so I used to like try to like lay an object on a piece of blank paper and like trace it and then take a protractor or something, you know, to calculate an angle. Because angles are like a critical thing, obviously, when you're trying to capture dimensions of things and all kinds of stuff. And or a lot of times what you do is you just kind of like measure some distances point to point and you let the CAD figure out the trig of the angles, right? So that's another way to do it. But sometimes you can't get in where you need to go and capture the angle right. So, you know, sometimes tracking down the right angle, get it, can be kind of tricky. So for $23 on Amazon, this company General makes this amazing digital angle finder. And it's like one of the best tools that I ever have bought. And I've been using it. I use it all the time. And it's made by General Tools. It's called the 828 Digital Sliding T-Bubble Gauge and Digital Protractor in one. And so it can get you deci precision angles, which is far better than what a protractor is ever going to get you. And you can put it in your CAD and not worry about being off. It also has some really awesome little features too. It like if you get into like a tight area, so what happens is you turn the thing on and you zero it just like you would a regular pair of calipers. You zero it out because it's digital, and then you kind of slide it out, and this thing kind of slides up and down or like this. And it can find angles. So what you can actually do is you can slide this into something and then you can press this hold button and it'll actually hold that angle so that you can get it into like a tight area that you couldn't see it. So even an area that you wouldn't be able to take a measurement with any other tool that I know of. And you can read angles like inside, like this week I was reading the inside of a PVC pipe. So like an angle of like this weird PVC pipe project I was working on. And it was awesome. So get yourself one of these. It's a General Tools 828 digital sliding T-bevel gauge. It's $23. It's Amazon.
And we'll have a link in the show notes, right?
And we'll have a show notes link. And I have a little side note to go along with that. As my dad used to say, measure twice, cut once. It's especially important with a digital protractor or even calipers is zero out your thing, take the measurement twice. It's just better because then you can see if you're off. So you take that measurement twice, write it down, you know, take it once, write it down, take it again, write it down, and make sure that they're both within, you know.
What? You only use a sample of 2?
Take 3 or 4 is even better. 10. Yeah, Mike. Yeah. Or 10. Yeah. Depending on what you're doing. Like if you're NASA, yeah, you're going to want to take an even larger sample size there.
But it's
you're going to Mars.
Yeah. Then you buy a $20 digital measurement.
Yeah.
But I agree with you. I want one of those. Are you buying me one? No, just kidding.
It's cool, man. You got to have it. If you're taking any angles. Yeah.
Mr. Printwhisperer.
There you go. That's my tip of the day. You're welcome.
Excellent. All right. Well, I've got a couple of things to mention. So if you look at the screen that I have up, this is what happened. You know, I still have my Note 7. I'm a developer. I don't use it as my day-to-day device. It is the best Snapdragon 820 device out there. I have turned it in. This is the new one I have now. I've been cautious. I store it. I turn it off in the evening. It is basically for this. But this is what I woke up to one day.
Whoa. Actually, they remote disabled it.
Yes. So without my consent, without noticing me, I woke up and could not use my little unit here, my GVR. So they've literally bricked my new GVR 2016. It was about $100. I have no use for it. But if you know, remember, I have actually modified it so I could use it for Google Cardboard. But, you know, I have another product called the uPLAy that serves me well there. So now, you know, I told Chris I was going to throw this behind me, but I don't like to break my items. So I'm really disappointed in this because, you know, it's not like I use my Gear VR every day. I use it for development to test things out. In fact, I have mine set in developers mode, so I don't even really need the Gear VR, but I can't even do that. And I have been working on this new application, which, you know, I gave a little bit of a sneak preview, and I'll bring it up now. This is a product that I call Graveyard. Let me bring it up. Come on.
It's like the, I think you got hit with the Samsung police, bro. Here they are.
Actually, Samsung. Yeah. So here we go. Let me go ahead and bring it up so you can.
You got hit by the. You're getting raided by the Samsung police. Jeez, man.
Okay. So this is what I've been working on, and if you've been following the show,
yeah,
it's a little product that I call GVRgraveyard because.
So you can still use it, but you just can't use it in the Oculus.
Well, I wanted to have it on all platforms, including the Gear VR.
Yeah, no, I was just curious. But it's so the Note 7 itself is not disabled, only with the Oculus app on the Note
That's
7
correct.
is disabled. Huh.
Yeah, the Note 7. I mean, Samsung is smart enough to realize that I'm an adult and that they just can't brick my phone because of a recall that, if you remember, is voluntary. Now, I agree. We need to be responsible. I don't take it out of the house anymore. And I do ensure my own safety and others about the problems with it. I am very fully aware of this. I have 3 decades worth of engineering experience, and I should be treated as an adult, and I shouldn't have things shut off. I should at least be given the option to work with my stuff. I'll go back to the screen with maybe an indemnification form. I mean, I can jump out of an airplane. I just sign my life away. You know, there are risks to that. There are risks for everything. But I should be the one to be able to take that and not have something. And I'm not just coming down on Oculus here. I'm coming down on the ability for companies, because they have internet OTA capability. For instance, Microsoft pushes out updates that could kill your machine. They really pushed their Windows 10 update on people, and people were affected by that. They had no choice. We talked about Tesla removing features because of concerns with safety that in one incident. So we're doing things without, you know, if a consumer buys a product because they expect it to work, and in fact, the Gear VR 2016 was specifically came out to work with the Note 7, and that's why I bought a Note 7. Again, some people think that, okay, well, the Note 7 is dead. Fine. But now my Gear VR is dead because they've made a decision. But I can still, as mentioned, use my Note 7 because I think Samsung has done the appropriate thing. They've warned us. They told us, turn it off and send it off, which I'm planning to do. But there is not an equivalent phone at this particular time to take care of that. And I have been pretty harsh on these companies that have been, or these blog sites have been so critical. Explosion. Well, it's not really an explosion. You have an immense amount of heat. The screen cracks. You do have some toxic fumes, which is critical. It is flammable. It can burn your surrounding areas. But when I think of explosion, I consider fragments, and that has not been the case. And plus, we don't really know the whole stories about some of these incidences. For instance, one case, somebody said that a child of 12 years old, which was in the news, come to find out it was a Galaxy S7, which has had no problems. When we start talking about things just based upon hearsay or some sensationalist TV program running a nightly news and then spreading this, that to me is a concern. For those people who don't think Samsung is doing the appropriate thing, what else can they be doing? They thought they had solved the problem. They haven't. They've done a recall. They've shut down production. What else do you want from them? You know, some people thought, well, they should come to the United States and make a statement on stage. Well, they're from Korea. We don't expect our American people to go to other countries to make statements. We can make statements on Skype and other forums, and they have been making statements, and they have apologized. They are very concerned about their consumer, and like any company will, if they want to stay afloat. And, you know, I think they're doing the right thing. I wish the carriers like Verizon would step up and provide actual services, but, you know, that's part of their responsibility, and I'm having a struggle with Verizon right now. So it's been a very frustrating time for me, Chris. As you know, before our show here, I had a few words that I choose not to use on the show, and if you notice, I'm a little more settled now. But I don't think it is right to pull things, and yes, there's some legal concerns there, but I think, as you know, there are legal concerns about jumping out of an airplane, but I have that, you know, roller coasters. I mean, there are a lot of things that we risk our lives for, and some things more than others, but we're asked to sign an indemnification form to protect that. In some cases that works, it doesn't. I wish that Oculus would have done something like here, or at least warned me, told me, hey, a week from now, we're shutting you off. But no, cold turkey. Now I can't finish GVRgraveyard for the Gear VR. Sad. All right, Chris, that's my rant. Why don't you go ahead and shut us off? Let me see what's in our news.
Oh, well, great guest today. Thanks so much to Skip and Jim for both coming on and telling us a little bit about some want and also this great Vuze camera. Can't wait to try my hand at the Vuze. Maybe save up for one of those. I actually want to go out and check out some of the content in that showroom at Vuze.camera.
Well, and it's important. One of the things I wanted to point out, even though you can look at it in cardboard, cardboard limits you to basically 2K, which is half or 1/4 of the actual resolution that you can actually experience if you've got an Oculus or an HTC Vive or some other form. So I truly agree with you, and raw footage, even though it's probably compressed in MP4, still looks a lot better on these other devices. So
yeah. And obviously, thank you to Road to VR and Engadget and Oculus and Matthias Neisner. I love that new research that's being done. So thank you to any of the others that we may not have mentioned. And here we are looking at the shows coming up.
Yep, 3D printing shows come up. There's one in Italy, one in China, one in the Netherlands, and one in Russia, but we'll cover this again. The one in China, I mean, obviously they've been really pushing forward, as we talked about the XYZ earlier. They've really been pushing 3D printing within their own country, and they have had quite a few shows. VR has also been something that's exploded in China. So if you are in China, Shanghai, it's free upon registration. As you know, there are some costs to being part of any of these shows. There's, I guess, another VR event coming up at GDC. Is sponsoring actually the company behind GDC in November that I'm hoping to attend to. It's more for developers. It's like the 11th up in San Francisco. So if you're interested in that, I don't have a link for it, but I'll make sure it's in the show notes. All right, Chris, thank you again for coming on. As you said, we do have a lively show, so.
All right. And obviously, thank you to our listeners. And we will see you next week on All Things 3D.
Bye.